Hi there, everyone. 1 o'clock on Wednesday. It is the ACSA legislative lunch break, along with Edgar Zazwata, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. I'm Naj and Edgar, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. We're back after a couple of weeks off. Don't worry. We were actually working during those couple of weeks. Edgar, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, I miss this place, right? It feels like it's been a while. So good to be back here on Wednesday.
Yeah, it certainly is good to be back. We'll tell you what we were doing these last couple of weeks coming up. First off, if you're watching us, go ahead and say hello to us on the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. We missed you while we were gone, and we have a lot to report about during our time. We have Kevin McCarty, 7th District Assembly member, who's going to be joining us in a couple of moments to talk about school reopenings, to talk about transitional kindergarten, to talk about youth sports. We've got a plethora of things to talk to him about. Edgar, let's start off with 2 weeks ago. The reason we weren't here 2 weeks ago, we had the ACSA Superintendent Symposium, and perhaps the most newsworthy piece of the Superintendent Symposium was Governor Gavin Newsom joining our superintendents, joining ACSA Executive Director Wes Smith for a 30-minute one-on-one. That's video of it. You can access that on the ACSA YouTube page where many of you are currently watching. It was a really, really powerful interview. Edgar, I haven't had a chance to hear your review of what was said. After Gavin talked with Wes, you and I had a chance to do a 30-minute Q&A with his administration, but just your thoughts 2 weeks after this interview took place.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks later, we definitely got some attention. I think that's to say the least, right? I think this started as a conference with our soups, and just the nature of a virtual conference is sometimes things happen. The footage got out there, the press got a hold of it, other partners got a hold of it, and so that made for some exciting couple of days. I think the key takeaway though here was this, and I think it started a series of conversations and put into spotlight one of the big issues that I know we're going to get into is about vaccinations, and really what is the appropriate role for vaccinations to have as part of the school reopening process. And I think the piece that got the most attention there was the governor kind of having a heart-to-heart, if you will, with us and frankly with the public, and saying that if we say that this is going to be tied completely to vaccinations, he feared that it's not going to happen in some communities, and that we rather should be having a different conversation with our parents and our communities and saying maybe we're not going to bring kids back. And so I think the big takeaway there was he was very candid. Obviously, it was a different governor than we see sometimes in the noon press conferences. But I think just what I think folks appreciated was some of his passion, both as a parent, obviously as the leader, and trying to bring this whole conversation forward. But I think what struck many folks is just seeing it in his household, what all of us here. I know the assembly member, he feels this. He has 2 kids in public school, so we're all feeling this. And I think the governor speaking to what his vantage point to this conversation, I think, was a huge takeaway. And like I said, start a sequence of events here in the weeks to come, and this conversation got a lot of attention.
Yeah, got a lot of attention, made the national news. It was a very, very big deal what the governor was saying, and there was a lot of clarity to what he was saying. So it was good to be able to hear him. Hello to Gary Reller, Angela Shull, our first 2 people to jump in on the comment section. So good to see you, John and Jeff and Eric. So good to see you guys as well. We have so much planned for you today. Edgar, the other thing that I wanted to tackle before we get to our guests, it was reported over the last couple of days, this imminent deal between the legislature and the governor to reopen schools, that it could be finalized this week. Edgar, what are you hearing regarding what we are being told is an imminent deal, but we don't have a whole lot of information as of right now?
Yeah, as always, and then we'll push our guests maybe a little bit just to see where it goes with this. But obviously, I think what we're hearing, and the governor, I think, has been pretty transparent in his daily. I think he's had a press conference every day this week, saying that that things are progressing, and now they're expecting a deal between the legislature and the governor on this broader school reopening package. Remember, the context of this was the package that the governor put forth, putting forth $2 billion in a reopening incentive grant. That's kind of morphed into some of these other conversations. We expect some of that will be partly money. Some of it will be maybe some clarity around this vaccination piece, the testing cadences, all of the laundry list of questions we've been getting on our show for the last 6 weeks. We're thinking that here in the next few days, in the next day maybe, we could have some clarity on what compromise did the legislature and the governor come to on those issues.
Yeah, certainly some information to come. I know that things are very fluid right now. You and I are in constant communication with people across the street, if you will. So looking forward to getting more information. Saying hello to Barbara and Elisa and Isidro, Denise. And I'm seeing some new names on here, Edgar, that I have not seen before jump in. So that really means people were excited that you were going to be back on the air today.
Or maybe it's Kevin or you, or, you know, we'll take some credit for it, right?
We'll take some credit. Look, all right, folks, let's bring in our guest. We're so honored today to have Kevin McCarty, 7th District Assembly member from the Sacramento region with us here today. Assemblyman, thank you so much for being with us today. Let me just get right to it. Let's start with the reopening. Since that seems to be at the forefront of everybody's mind right now. Can you let us know your perspective on the reopening discussions, what you want to see with this deal, and how close we are?
Yeah, well, I guess the big picture, it's a big priority for Californians, certainly for people with kids, but also our economy. You want people to get back to work, you have to figure out what to do with their kids, and that's childcare as well. So, and as Edgar noted, I'm living this firsthand. I have two 12-year-old twin girls in 6th grade in the public school system here in Sacramento. So, you know, we're dealing with Zoom school, and our kids are they're doing well. They're figuring out, but frankly, a lot of families aren't. Some kids just having a tough time. Some people don't have the infrastructure, the technology, the family support. Maybe their parents are essential workers, or, you know, and they're not there to help. They have multiple kids, and so it's creating a lot of stress on families and you know, the mental health of families, parents, and our kids. So we're looking to fix it, and it's a big issue. I listen every day, like some people do. Maybe the podcast, the Daily, the New York Times Daily. They have a big topic every day. Today was talking about school reopening, nationally, what's happening across the nation. President Biden saying that we can safely reopen. So I'm very optimistic, the big picture of where we're at in COVID-19. If you look at the vaccinations rolling out, you look at the number of people who are hospitalized, the positivity rate, the ICUs, those are just dropping dramatically in the last month. You know, we are rolling out a million vaccines a week here in California. So I think that's really changing the dynamic of everything, and you'll start seeing counties to leave the purple tier to going to the yellow and the red. So yeah, I'm in the mix in the legislature with the assembly side. There's a few of us working with the Senate for the past few weeks to come up with a school reopening plan, mainly focusing on money in the state budget. You know, the $2 billion proposals in the governor's budget for reopening, plus the $4.5 billion on the school learning loss, and setting parameters about that as far as reopening. We could also get more money. I mean, frankly, the economy is doing well. Weirdly enough, as we know, the people who are well off in California, they're able to work from home like we're doing through Zoom. And the financial market and the housing market is doing very well. So the tax revenues coming the state are coming at a great clip, and they could be better in May. And like I said, we could get a third round of federal money. You know, the proposal from Biden, he may not get the nearly $2 trillion proposal he proposed a few weeks ago, but if that came through, you know, we're looking at $13 billion roughly in one time for California. So even if it's half that or a third of that, that's still several $billion for California, for our schools. And so, you know we have the resources. It's just kind of the will. And so, you know, I don't want to let you know all the details of it because we're not there yet, honestly. The Assembly and Senate, we're pretty close on a framework, and now we're negotiating with the government. Hopefully we can announce something very soon and then vote on this package in the coming days.
Assemblymember Kevin, thank you for being here. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so appreciate your time, especially in the midst of just everything breaking. As Naj said in his introduction, you alluded to right now, you're obviously you are part of leadership here in the Assembly in your position as on the chair of the Budget Subcommittee for Education. Obviously, you're always in the mix of these issues. As part of that group, we know you went to the administration, went to Department of Public Health. We're looking for more clarity on some issues, on kind of increasing the role of the state. And you folks made some news the first day of the legislative session by introducing AB 10. And we've gotten a ton of questions on AB 10 over the last couple months. But I think that the intent there was that at some point there should be a metric where schools just have to open, right? If you don't get to an agreement, that at some point there needs to be a trigger. Obviously, we won't ask you too much about the deal that's in the works, but maybe if you could just walk us through the thinking on just from the legislative standpoint on this bigger issue about compelling schools to move forward, and what do you see happening with this, just in the scope of the bigger conversations?
Sure. Well, when we introduced that bill in the first week of December, when we first came back, granted, we probably wrote it 2 weeks earlier, so mid-November, it was very different. You know, we didn't have the spike. We had many of these counties, including Sacramento, that were not in the purple. And I'll give you an example here in Sacramento. In my area, so none of us were in the purple. We all have the same public health, counts or number and color. We have roughly, a dozen school districts, let's say, and there were a few that were opening up, and they were in the affluent areas. And the areas in the cities, urban areas, frankly, where the communities don't have the resources, don't have the support. We had no confidence those were ever going to reopen. And so I think what we were saying is, and granted, it's apples and oranges because we're not there anymore. But I think the notion is that we can't just have districts going back and forth and negotiating forever, and then we'll never reopen. Granted, we went to the purple. It's a little bit different now, and now we're getting out of the purple. So, things have changed. But I think that's the values why we went forward with that. I think one thing that we were looking back and kicking ourselves is last year when we passed the budget, we didn't think no one knew anything. We didn't know how long it's going to last. And we probably, and I, in hindsight, wish we would have had some strings on those dollars and had a mandated reopening when communities were not in the purple. So I think those are kind of the values that we have. And now we're kind of pivoting a little to what we're talking about right now, which is the budget. And we have a potential early action on, north of $6 billion for education. And we're focusing on those issues and those values we had into putting it into this budget bill that we're going to be voting on in the coming days, I hope. Maybe next week at the earliest.
And folks, we want to encourage you, go ahead and drop in your questions and comments for Assemblyman McCarty over in our chat. We have a number of questions that have come in, James and Gabrielle and Taylor. We'll get to as many of these as we possibly can. Kevin, let me ask you about the CDPH guidelines, specifically the blueprint, which has been in place for some time and driven by specific data. Do you think the markers with the blueprint still hold up as we move into the spring, and do you see some changes?
I can't say if they're inadequate right now. I do know it's a very fluid situation as far as what's happening in the adaptation because of the vaccine and what's happening with just counts going down across the state. I think some districts are saying we will never get out of purple. We'll be in purple forever. I don't know if that's true anymore. There are some areas that are deeply concerned. I talked to my colleagues from the Salinas Valley, if anybody's here on that call, and they were saying they're a farm worker area. And this is harvest season in the next few weeks. I'm not sure what crop they grow there, but they're saying they're going to get a crew of workers coming up from Yuma, Arizona, which there is a hotbed right now of COVID in Yuma. So those workers are coming up from Yuma, so there may be another spike. And so it's hard to tell what some of these areas may have, some of these micro areas across California. I can't say one way or the other whether or not that's going to change or if it should be changed.
Kevin, obviously reopening is on everybody's mind and we're getting a bunch of questions, but we're going to switch topics for just 1 second. We'll come back to the reopening topic, but transitional kindergarten, obviously that's an issue that you've always been passionate about through your legislative career. Even before that, you've been one of the champions there in the legislature on the broader ECE issue. Give us the scoop. Obviously, you've introduced some ambitious legislation as it relates to transitional kindergarten. So kind of give us the lay of the land of what is it that you're seeking this year?
Yeah, well, first of all, you may say, well, how can you be talking about that? We're trying to reopen our schools, but we need to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we're focusing on the immediate and reopening our schools now, but we also be focusing on the future and next year, the year after that. So look, I'm a big supporter of early education. I bet everybody on this call, this online, I said Zoom, but it's not, whatever you use here, believes in the value of early education and the ECE matters. And, we've been trying to figure out how we have universal pre-K in California for several years. And many states do it. California, we're ahead of lots of things, but we're one state that doesn't offer universal access for 4-year-olds. So we think this is a year to really look at it and focus on the path of transitional kindergarten. We have the infrastructure in place. We have all school districts offering TK. It's already a grade, of course, so we're not creating a new program. We're just creating more, eligible individuals to participate in TK. And as we know, TK is available just for a quarter of the population, kids that are born during the fall months. So the notion is that we would over a couple of years expand access and have districts have to offer TK for all 4-year-olds over a several year roll-in. This is attractive for several districts. Some may be on this participating today. The sponsor of our bill is a San Diego school district. They are a declining enrollment school district, plus big believers in early ed, and they've done TK very well there. And so they view this as an opportunity to really deal with the achievement and opportunity gap for early ed, but also bring in more students to the district through more ADA. So it's kind of a win-win-win there. How we view it, and the governor has embraced this as well, by the way. The governor thinks that we should do universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds, and he's embraced that TK is the route to go, by the way, as opposed to the state preschool program. We think that TK works. Research shows it works. We have a credentialed teacher. We're talking about, which most districts do anyway with TK, smaller classes having one credentialed teacher and mandate having one paraprofessional in the classroom. So that's kind of the framework. We also want to allow, even though it would be a mandate over several years to roll this out, we want to allow districts who are entrepreneurial to start today. So, if you want to start, not today literally, but like, let's say the summer in July when the new fiscal year starts, if you want to start enrolling kids in your TK class, you can start collecting ADA today. I know LAUSD, for example, and some others have been doing that, the extended TK, where they enroll kids mid-year and don't collect ADA until that kid, turns 5. And so we would allow that district to start collecting ADA right now. So we're looking for input. I know there are implementation issues. So, members or ACSA wants to give us guidance on that. We'd certainly appreciate that. And also too, just a kind of in the weeds caveat that by moving all 4-year-olds to TK under Prop 98, there's about $1 billion we currently spend on the California State Preschool Program for low-income kids to be in the state preschool. We would redirect that $1 billion to serve 0 through 3. So if you're a district that currently has a state preschool program, or a Head Start program, like, hey, what about us? We don't want to go out of business. Our idea is you can serve more 3-year-olds who are low income, and then you'd have the TK for 4-year-olds. And what does that mean for kids, especially kids who don't come from the privileged backgrounds? They get 2 years of quality early ed before they enter kindergarten. And I know the governor believes, and so do I, that could be a real game changer as far as the opportunity gap. So this is, again, my top priority bill, and we'll be working on it. There is a little twist. Some who are declining enrollment districts say, yes, that's great. Some are growth districts say, oh, I don't know about that. We're serving more kids, not necessarily more money in Prop 98 under this test one scenario. We are exploring this analysis. We think it's accurate from the LAO that says that right now money goes in this Prop 2 rainy day fund, for Prop 98, that when you implement TK, there won't be as much of a drop in ADA, so that money will no longer have to go to that rainy day fund. It'll pay for at least half of the implementation of TK, the new ADA, on an annual ongoing basis. Plus, we're looking at, in the budget, there's a lot of one-time money. You know, it seems like every other day we have more money in Prop 98, a lot of one-time, potentially using some one-time money for additional money for startup grants for districts. And so we think this is the year to make it happen. If not this year, I'm not sure when we can do it. And so, you know, really engaged and asking ACSA to help us make it happen.
Yeah, we appreciate the invitation for feedback, and you know our folks are not shy. So when you ask for feedback, I'm sure they're going to provide that. And you actually answered the questions about the funding, so we'll definitely keep digging in the days to come on that proposal. So thanks for that.
Okay. Yeah, let me ask, because you're involved in the negotiations right now for school openings. Angela Shell, one of our loyal viewers here, asked the question, what feedback are you getting from schools, boots on the ground people, with respect to reopening needs? You talked earlier about some of the conversations that you've been having, but what's been some of the feedback you've been getting from the field?
I'm off you there. There we go. I pressed the chat.
Yeah, I won't do that again.
As long as you don't turn into a cat, Kevin, whatever you do, don't turn into the cat. I don't know if you saw the video. You don't know.
Yeah, I saw that. It was ridiculous.
Did you hear the question, Kevin?
Yeah. What feedback are we getting from districts? Just more clarity, more guidance, more support. What to do with testing and vaccines. I think that's been an issue. One thing that the governor said is true. If we wait for you know, the perfect, we will never have the opportunity to focus on the good. One thing that we're thinking about as far as the vaccine, and kind of my perspective as well, if you look at, you know, we are doing 1 million vaccines a week in California, and that's just with the Pfizer and the Moderna. We could get this Johnson & Johnson in a month, so we're really moving at a strong clip. And if you think about it, you know, as you know, you're in education, whether six, you know, I would say roughly 6 million public school kids. That's just K through 12. And then so there's probably 10 million plus kids under 18 who aren't getting the vaccine anyway right away. So you're just focusing on adults. So we're really moving fast. So we think in the very near future that we could have, you know, focus on educators, you know, on schools that are going back. And we're not going to mandate people must take a test. But I think it's not too unreasonable to put out there. Maybe we should have as an element that every educator who wants to take a vaccine has the opportunity to get one before they re-enter in this new era. So I think that's one of the things that's a real possibility because of the expansion of the vaccine access and by how far we've been going so far.
We had a question from Terry Roofer, and this is half question, part sentiment, which I know you will appreciate. In terms of, with so much emphasis in the reopening conversation, it's easy to focus on the communities that we're both in. You know, both our kids are Sac City. Obviously, they're not open, and a lot of the big urbans aren't open. But there is a lot of schools in the state that have been able to manage to open and do it safely, even in the midst of the pandemic. So Terry asked, will there be a process? Will there be anything in this legislative package that may change essentially the rules for them? One, they want to stay remain open. Others fear that, legislature's putting new requirements in. Will this force us to go back to the negotiating table or the drawing board in terms of changing either their safety plans or their agreements?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think the only thing that we're kind of a requirement for all districts is they have a COVID plan. And I think these districts are already open, have one because they're open. We are focusing more on resources. These two pots of money that were outlined, is no secret there. In the January budget that we're looking at, the $2 billion or so roughly, the reopening grants, and then the learning loss money as well, as far as tying that to some type of reopening. So I think there would just be more resources, hopefully more clarity, and a path for your teachers to get a vaccine. I literally think that's right around the corner. I'm very optimistic that that vaccines are going to start just being readily available, like flu shots. Like, you can go to Kaiser, you can go to your school district. Oh, they're doing a flu shots at CVS. Oh, they're doing one outside of some mall for free today. So like, I think that's.
Let me go ahead and hit the sports question, because James Top asks, will the governor allow youth and high school sports and not be contingent on school reopening? So let me ask this. You helped lead a bipartisan effort to have the governor's administration reconsider the reopening of sports. So what are the next steps on reopening youth and high school sports?
Yeah, so I think that we have to focus on the same time as schools and sports. I think it's smart. I don't think this is something that we should necessarily tie together, but they're both part of the minds of so many people in my community. And look, I think that there are some sports that just don't make sense. Indoor sports, indoor wrestling and basketball, I don't think that makes sense indoors where we're at today. But outdoor sports, soccer, baseball out there, if a girl could play high school softball and be in center field, not with 75 feet from somebody, why is not that allowed? But you can do it. You can go in a tot lot and have 100 kids packed on a playground. So, I think there's some inconsistency there. But the thing that really gets me, frankly, is that there are club sports that are playing. My nephew is a football player in Southern California, so I get emails and texts from my brother, and the teams down there. The club sports can pay to participate, but the high school sports can't. So if you're an urban high school area, maybe you don't have the money for club, and so we're having these rules where they're even doing club basketball, which I think is outrageous, being indoors, but we're allowing club activities outside, but not the sanctioned school activities, and that makes no sense. So I think that we can do outdoor sports in a safer manner. I think there needs to be increased protocols. I'm not saying this is how we're going to do it. I think a lot of people question like tackle football, but if you watch a Super Bowl this past week, certainly the players on the field didn't have masks. They went to the sidelines, they're required to wear masks. And so there's things you can do. So it's not just opening back up outdoor sports and have business as usual, but you should be able to do things in a more enhanced way. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get some new guidelines from the state and the governor. I know the governor is optimistic. He said publicly that he's hopeful that we can get an agreement on youth sports in the near future. And so you're right. It was a bipartisan effort. I led an effort to get, 40 or 50 lawmakers, and roughly half Democrats, half Republicans, signed a letter to the governor that asked for this.
No, appreciate your efforts there. No big surprise. Naj and I are soccer coaches. I know you're a youth sports coach, so obviously an issue that's big to us. Follow up on the sports piece, just to not necessarily on what's going to happen, but what the ask is. Isidro asks, is high school involved in this effort, or is this since we're tying it to reopening the schools and we're talking about K-8 for schools, but in the effort to reopen youth sports, are we also including high schools? Was the question. You could talk in terms
of most of the youth sports in question right now are high school sports. Unfortunately, very few elementary and middle schools have sanctioned sports anymore. It's mainly high schools. And I feel for these kids, especially kids who are trying to go into college and scholarships and so forth. This is their chance to shine. And I think it shows the inequities. You can drive down a community and see people playing sports outside with a club sport, but they can't do the same sport for the high school activity. And that makes no sense. And not to mention the travel ball teams as well. So this would be for all youth sports, including high school.
You know, there is a true deadline coming up for some of these sports. One that comes to mind is football, that there really is a deadline to even begin training so that they could have some type of a season. And then there is this, the season has to end at this specific point. As you guys are having these discussions about youth sports, is there an understanding in the Capitol that it's time sensitive and that time is really running out?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a date. We're looking at a date up there, but we know that the clock is ticking. We also know that, you know, we want to be safe and protect people as well. So we can't just be irresponsible saying youth sports. So we can open up youth wrestling tournaments inside, or basketball, or indoor volleyball. So I'm focused on outdoor again activities. Yeah, but we also hear from the CIF that they're looking to be adaptable. Look, if you're a high school football team and typically you have a 10 game schedule and then potentially playoffs and so forth, that's the dream. But I'm confident that if we get sports back, that these teams and schools will figure out to have an abbreviated schedule and just to have some semblance of normalcy for their student athletes. And it means so much to them, especially the seniors. So I know that the leagues want, the CIF and the teams are having pressure to open up tomorrow. And you know, I keep getting these messages saying, "Hey, I hear there's a deal. We can start practicing on Friday morning." And that always is nonsense. But believe me, this is a priority for the governor. I've talked to his top staff about this, and I've seen his quotes, and I know for a bunch of our lawmakers it's the same. It's bipartisan. So I'm very optimistic that, you know, school reopening and youth sports will have an announcement very soon.
Good news.
Not by the end of this program today, but
oh,
very
come
soon.
On!
You were going to break the news for us today.
I wish I could. Yeah, and then I could text back my brother and my nephew.
One more question from me, Kevin, just on this vaccine issue, and I think it's just in full transparency, and you know this. The position of ACSA has been that we absolutely, everything you said, prioritize the vaccinations. We don't necessarily believe that it should be conditional on vaccination, just given, you know, different community circumstances. I think you strike an optimistic tone, which I think we would all welcome. And I know we got a couple questions there. Just so we're clear in terms of whether it be your positioning or the assembly, you see this being part of the negotiation. We know that there's strong opinions from all stakeholders on this issue of vaccination. I'll just give you one more chance to kind of expand on your perspective on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I believe. A number of my assembly colleagues, we talked about this. I can't speak for everybody in the legislature. But I think just what's happening in California, it's not that much. It's not that far-fetched to see how we're moving along at a good clip. Like I said, about 1 million vaccines a week. We're up to north of 4 million people now. And then if you take out, you know, people who refuse the vaccine, maybe that's 25 to 30% of the population right now who aren't interested. And the fact that, you know, we're not giving it to minors in the current condition, you know, we're going to get pretty quick anyway to people who are teachers in the first place. And so I think that it's not a far-fetched scenario that maybe we could say, hey, you know, this time frame we're going to focus on our educators, like we have focused on certain aspects of our population, like frontline healthcare workers so far.
Hey, Kevin, before we let you go, it is my understanding that you are quite an athlete. You've been a youth coach. You've also led softball teams, including a softball team that my colleague Edgar has been on. Can you give us an Edgar scouting report on his on-field capacity as a softball player?
Well, thank you for that description of me as a great athlete. So I think I'm a great athlete for a legislator. I'll give that. But as far as an athlete, look, I'm very proud that in my late 40s I can still get out there and lace it up and play at a competitive level. And it's a lot of fun. And I do have a team that I put together, and it's mainly lawmakers and advocates, people who work around the Capitol. And every once in a while, we're scrambling for a sub because somebody, has something going on, or maybe they pulled a hamstring or something like that. So we have called subs over the years, and I will say that some subs play once and don't get invited back for the second time. But I will say that your chief government affairs person there, Mr. Zasweta, was invited to sub last year, did a fine job, and he was invited back for a second. And he is a friend of mine. But I would not have invited him back on charity. I would have been kicked out of my job as the manager. So we're strictly based upon talent. Yeah, Edgar's a good player, good middle infielder, good hands. Still has some speed on him, and puts the ball in play, hard line drive. So it's not going to knock it out of the park, but a good second baseman. I wouldn't call him
on first base. Maybe take two there. Somebody bobbles it, right? So my hamstrings don't go out. But.
Yeah.
Assemblymember McCarty from the 7th District here in the state of California. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. And thank you to all the educators throughout California who helped to work on the top issue. What we're here for is our education, our youth, and making sure we have a good public education system for 6 million kids. And I'm proud that we're all in this working together, and thanks for the partnership and giving us ideas, whether it's the budget or early ed or TK, and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, very much. Hey, I want to point out something, Edgar. Gary Reller, our loyal viewer over at Matthew Gage Middle School, Riverside Unified District, asked this question: where is ACSA in testing as a requirement for reopening? I know you're seeing that question. Let me make note for all of our viewers here. If you are an ACSA member, if you receive ACSA email, around 8:35 this morning, you received an advocacy email, an urgent advocacy email to contact your legislator. The reason I know you got it at 8:35, Edgar, is because I pushed the button, which is why why I know the precise time of which you got it. This is an important advocacy need right now. Edgar, can you just kind of talk about the need right now?
Yeah, as the Assembly member said, we expect that there's something imminent in the works, right? And while we're getting bits and pieces here, and we're pretty good at getting the intel, there's no better place for them to hear direct feedback than you folks. And I'll be straight up, while a lot of what the Assembly member said is positive, we have concerns that some of this stuff could go in a different direction, and it may not be helpful to our folks. So that's why we pushed this out, and we just want to shore up our bases, right, on this issue of the vaccinations, having this fine line of, yes, we want to prioritize, but we don't want to put another hurdle in place for our folks where they can't open, or it gets in the way of them expanding in-person instruction. There's the issue, like Terry asked about, what's going to be the impact on schools that are currently open? Will they be able to grandfather their plans? Will they be asked to go back and do new things? That's a big issue. We've been pretty consistent on the collective bargaining piece, that we don't want to see any more expansion of collective bargaining. We know our requirements under the law, but if we're going to be asked to go back to the table on more issues, that's going to be another hurdle. And then this last piece, which frankly could be the biggest one, is the testing cadences. I think unanimously our chat box has been filled for weeks about the concerns about the aggressive testing schedules that were recommended by the governor's administration. We want to make sure that there's movement on that in the final deal. And the only way that that's going to happen is if our folks continue to reach out to the legislators. And we've been getting some good reports of folks all over the state doing just that. So we really ask folks to make that push. And as we like to say, just tell your story. You don't have to be an expert on the policy. Explain what's going on in your neck of the woods, and explain what some of these potential decisions may mean for your ability to serve kids.
And let me make note of this. Our loyal viewer and comms star, Scott Smith over at ABC Unified, he put it right there, folks. Received the email, action taken, advocacy at work. Be Scott Smith, folks. Our social media whiz, Gianna Miller, has gone ahead and posted the link to finding your legislator. That is in the chat. So go ahead and do that. Click on that link, copy and paste that link. Gail Olson said she's going to send it today. That's good, because I know if Gail says she's going to send it, Gail is absolutely going to send it. Two other things. Edgar, let me just get your response to some of what Kevin was saying and some of what we're hearing about a deal for reopening schools being imminent and something about youth sports being imminent. You and I have the experience of when we hear about a deadline, sometimes if something is going to happen this week, it's sometimes an artificial deadline. Do you think that this is going to happen this week, or do you think it bleeds into next week?
I think on the school reopening piece, it seems all indications is they're trying to land this plane, if you will. They're trying to get something done. So I do expect that by the end of, if not today, tomorrow, we could see some action. Given our urgency in our member, we don't typically put out messages, say urgent, do it now. Right now, we are saying that because we do expect this is going to get put to bed here soon. I think on the same front, while this youth sports is not dealing with legislation, that's not something that the legislature would necessarily vote on. I think the governor has kind of joined the two together. I think Kevin McCarty did the same thing, right? That we kind of have to talk about both the same way. Expect an announcement on the youth sports could happen in conjunction with whenever they finalize the school reopening deal.
The sooner the better for so many of our students out there. You and I being soccer coaches, I know we can't wait to get our players back on the field. Just want to let all of our viewers know, ACSA Campus Tour returns tomorrow beginning at 10. Lori Emmington, principal over at Vista del Lago High School in the Folsom Cordova Unified School District. She is going to be on the show tomorrow to talk a little bit about how she and her team are supporting, especially juniors and seniors right now who are going through that process of applying to universities, what the testing situation is. Some are saying test optional, some are still requiring it. So we're going to talk with Lori tomorrow about that. Edgar, good show today, man. We had lots of stuff. The chat board was going. Kevin had a lot of stuff to say, so hopefully there's some excitement coming up in the rest of this week. But the message is very clear. Advocacy matters. Do it now. Yeah,
it was a good show back. It was good to see all these familiar faces and some new ones.
Yes.
This does now feel like home here on Wednesdays at 1. So we had a good discussion, but let's not stop it here on this advocacy piece. Thank you for those. I know a number of you have been making those calls. I'm seeing folks that are watching us. Just really encourage everybody to take 5 minutes, make that phone call, send an email, really get your voices heard here in the next day, really.
Edgar, good seeing you.
Always fun, Naj.
Always fun. Thank you, folks, so much for being with us here today. We are back next Wednesday at 1 p.m. for the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We'll see you then.